This is the Friday, November 9, 2018 version of the Market Plus segment. Joining us now is Sue Martin. Sue, welcome back.
Thank you.
Sue, we did a great tease there right at the end of the program. You're bullish hogs. Now I'm going to let you tell me why.
Well, first off, we noted that the USDA, WASDE, in their report here on Thursday, lowered pork production for the fourth quarter by, I think it was, I want to say 105 million pounds.
Okay.
And then for next year, they lowered it by another 95 pounds. But they left exports alone. So that in of itself, when you're tightening up production, but yet you're leaving the window open for demand, that's a friendly thing. More than that, if China can't do any better job on their corn data, how are we to believe them that they're now up to 64 cases reported in 18 provinces? And one of them's right next, Jillin's right next to North Korea. And North Korea is a country that is very, very tight on food supplies. So they can't afford, because pork is a major thing, they can't afford to have that slip into their country, and I wouldn't be shocked if it did. I think the situation with African swine fever is way bigger than we're hearing. But again, with China, actions speak louder than their words. And when they start to hit the pork market for imports, Shinwei owns, Smithfield Foods. So I think when they start pulling pork, that's going to be our cue.
Do you think they will start pulling pork, even with all of the trade stuff going on?
I think they will. They may elect to try to move in other areas, but since they own Smithfield, they might just try to pull it from the U.S., besides other areas. The problem is you have African swine fever showing up in other countries as well. And so it's kind of a concern of because they don't want to take a chance of importing pork and having it come in on the meat, because it certainly can. So I think China's got a big problem. I think that's going to be a bullish factor for us as we go down the road. It's going to take some time. We're going to have to probably be well into next year. I think it's probably the markets that will be affected the most will be your June, July, and August contracts. But I think it'll be a very bullish tilted market, all about demand and less numbers in the U.S.
So you mentioned June, July, August of next year is probably when we're looking to see some extra demand from China or some strength in the markets. That's already a time of seasonality when we see a lot of increased prices. How much of a premium is this going to add to those months? You
could see, just when we dealt with PRRS in a big way here in the U.S., hog prices by April went to 120. And by June, I think they went to 130.
Producers at home are going to love those numbers.
So we could possibly see something very similar to that, where we attack that 100 mark and push up towards those highs. I would not underestimate anything like that. And China's a huge, huge country. I mean, 400, I've heard several different estimates, 435 million,
That's
488 million.
Too.
And then you have, 167 million in Europe. And then, of course, the U.S. comes in under those. But, and they still import pork because they don't get enough of it. China has their Lunar New Year coming up here, too, on February 5th.
And that's a big time for pork consumption.
It's a very big time, along with soybean oil. But they're with this kind of a problem, and they have 6,000 processing plants. We only have 20. So it's like, how do they really get their arms around it? How do they know they're not processing sick hogs that haven't totally passed off? And in the meantime, it's in that meat. I just think China's got a huge problem. They've got too big of a portion of their hog industry that's mom and pop, backyard
not
type.
Commercialized, right?
Exactly, that are not commercialized. I mean, I think the biggest percentage of their pork production is that way. And how do you corral that? Will they have the type of protocol that a commercial would have? I doubt it. And if they see a sick hog and they think it's African swine fever, knowing that that meat could still be consumed, they're going to go take that hog and process it because they need that money.
Unfortunately, yeah. So I want to switch tracks just a little bit here and talk about soybeans. We talked about it during the main program, but I have this question for you. I was reading some commentary earlier this week that said Brazil's soybean harvest, or excuse me, soybean planting is way ahead of schedule. Harvest is probably going to come a lot earlier this year. They're thinking December, January, early January, and usually it's late January, early February. That's usually the time of year when the U.S. can pick up some of that extra market pace and export to China. What's that going to do for our markets this year if we don't have a trade deal in place?
Well, if we don't have a trade deal in place, then it's going to be concerned. Exports out of Brazil have really slowed, and China does need beans. In fact, between now and I would say early January, maybe the middle of January, they're going to probably need a little over 13 million metric tons of beans. Now, the USDA in the WASDE report did lower China's imports. They lowered it from 95, I think it was, or 94, down to 90. So they're kind of making it that direction. And actually, CNGOIC had over time been saying we would see a 10 million metric ton reduction in those numbers. And so we've shaved 4 off it now with WASDE. But China is going to be needing beans, but Mato Grosso, where a lot of these beans will come out early, they are, early in is early out. They are a landlocked, they're the largest producing province in Brazil, but they're landlocked. And so they start harvesting in mid-December, and you don't just do this overnight.
Right.
They start harvesting in mid-December, they into January. All of a sudden now, okay, it's harvested, but you got to get it moved to the commercial, to the port. It's going to take till mid-January to get that stuff really going.
So it's a concern, but it's not maybe quite as a dire concern as what the trade is suggesting.
I think what it smells like, if we continue to push beans in a firmer note here, granted, we could peak and drop off after Thanksgiving just because if we don't get something, if there's disappointment in that Trump agreement. Although, and I'm kind of deviating a little, former Governor Terry Branstad, who's our ambassador to China, did make a comment yesterday that he thought the agreements between President Xi and President Trump, that there could be some framework agreements made there.
And I think President Trump has instructed some of his cabinet members to go ahead and start putting together some loose framework for the G20 meeting.
Actually, yes, he has. And so I think we could see the market kind of try to hang on here and push up into a little bit of an uptrend into early January. And then all of a sudden they just crater.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised. And it's interesting because beans on a lead contract have yet to take out the July lows. The November made new lows from what they had in July, but as a lead contract, they have not. And in years when you hold that, you tend to lift right into the expiration of the Nov contract, and that looks like that's what we're after.
All right, Sue, I'm going to skip ahead here. Got a question about re-ownership strategies. We've got Tim. He said, is it better to store the grain or re-own on paper?
If you have on-farm storage, then I'd say store it at home. If you're paying an elevator to store it, I would not do that. I would sell it. The basis has way improved here lately. Very good, in fact. I think on the river it's like 6-7 cents under. So that is good. And I think what it is the basis has improved because of the lateness of the crop getting out. And now they're trying to draw it from the farmer, and they're hanging on tight because they don't like the prices, not to mention the wide basis. So the basis has been narrowing to entice them to let go of some, because I think the commercials are a little nervous about getting barges loaded and getting them down the river before the river would freeze.
Yeah.
It's been such a cold start to the winter, actually fall, and so I think they're a little nervous about that, and so that's helped. If you can catch that improvement in basis, then fine, go ahead and move it and then re-own it. Give yourself some time. I would say probably go to July, and then if you have to, roll it on out into August. Well, it'd be September corn, and then in beans you could roll to August. My concern is this next year, I've been working on looking at next year's plan. And next year looks pretty traditional, pretty seasonal. And I have data that goes back to 1913 on soybeans and 1908 on corn. And it's come out of the USDA. So I think a lot of people don't realize that that data is there. And you look at years ending in a 9, how many years can you recall that are real special? Not too many. The ones that were special ended up in the last quarter of the year being special with a low in the middle of the year. And I'm not sure we have it quite that way, but because the market's going to be fighting around with acres, you're going to have fertilizer on for corn this fall in a big way. That leaves the farmer wide open to change his plans if something happens good. If we get a deal with China, all of a sudden you're going to see the market, if we rallied 30 cents just on a President Trump tweet, we'll probably rally $1 real quickly. But we're telling producers, take advantage of that. You've got, it's pretty well thought it'll be a moderate El Nino coming, maybe a strong one. But in that situation, Argentina gets wet, they catch their rains, unlike this last year, and it was because of them we rallied like we did. And then you have southern Brazil kind of in that same mode. Center part of Brazil's kind of, well, in the middle of it, I guess, you know, could even almost turn a little dry. But it's the far northern part of the country that turns dry. And so that could be a situation where all of a sudden our weather is kind of a concern. In the U.S., the south gets wet and has maybe too much moisture, that kind of a thing, and we become more drier here. But, you know, it's also a year of, what is it, the grand solar minima. And so you throw that twist in there on how that affects everything along with this, and I'm not sure just how everything will shake out.
I guess it's to be determined. Sue Martin, thank you for your wealth of knowledge, and thank you for being on the show with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Join us again next week when we'll explore how hay exporters have recovered from a dockside dispute that briefly closed their market, and Dan Huber will join me at the market-to-market table. Until then, thanks for watching, listening, or reading. I'm Delaney Howell. Have a great week.